My name is Tina Moreno. I'm going to talk about alternative or augmentative and alternative communication and literacy today. Augmentative and alternative communication can mean anything from low tech or no tech, exchanging pictures. It could mean sign language. It can mean robust communication computers. And I'm really excited to be here today. Thank you for having me. I'm from the Cuyahoga County Board of Developmental Disabilities that's headquartered in the Cleveland area. Our Cuyahoga County Board of Developmental Disabilities serves about 12,000 individuals. We employ about 900 professionals who provide services and support individuals in their natural environment, whether it's home, school, work, community. We use a person-centered approach, and we connect people to services in the area. I am a speech-language pathologist and AAC specialist here in the county. I serve children ages 3 and up, and I primarily provide collaboration, consulting, training to school districts and parents who serve children ages 3 and up who use augmentative and alternative communication to communicate. I'm also a volunteer co-director of Camp ALEC. Camp ALEC is an AAC and literacy camp that happens in Michigan every year, a week long. We serve 20 kids every year who use communication devices as their voices. It's a very adapted program. We've got all kinds of accessible things to do. It's a typical summer camp experience, and on top of that, kids participate in amazingly motivating and fun language-rich literacy activities, and they go home with a assessment report that helps provide information to their educators as to how they might provide instruction and assessment for their kids. And we provide training to about 20 educators from across the U.S. and Canada every summer. They come to get this hands-on advanced training in literacy instruction and assessment for individuals with complex communication needs and significant disabilities as well. This is why... At the camp, yep. It's a week long. It's a sleepover. It is, yeah, we're getting geared up for it. It's going to happen in about 3 weeks. This is why I do what I do. This is my son, Mateo. He is 20, and he's been using a communication device since he was 4. His speech is really darn unintelligible to everybody else. But he can communicate absolutely anything that he needs to say. And that includes when he was in the hospital and had to have emergency surgery and was critically ill and on a ventilator, right? We didn't have the word ventilator on his communication system. He had to spell. So in order to be able to provide access to all language to children who use AAC, we have to be able to teach them how to spell. Otherwise, they're limited to whatever symbols we decide we need to put on their devices. And that I am not a mind reader. And that's not enough for me. So this is why I do what I do. I'm a little intimidated by y'all because you are mama bears and grandma bears and papa bears. I consider myself a mama bear too, but I haven't walked in your shoes, right? And we might buy our shoes at a similar department store, but I can't pretend to know what you know. I only know what I know. And I want to start with some big picture ideas. And just start by saying that oral and written language development can happen all at the same time. We don't have to wait for kids to be able to communicate to a certain level, and then we'll decide to incorporate some literacy. We can teach communication and receptive language and expressive language, and we can teach reading and writing all at the same time with an integrated approach. And there aren't any prerequisites for teaching communication and literacy. Each skill overlaps and interacts with one another. And again, the thing I want to emphasize is that AAC users can only communicate anything to anybody, anywhere, if they can spell. thought for the day is we want to make children want to read. We can't make them read. This is a quote by Dr. Karen Erickson. Dr. Karen Erickson at the University of North Carolina and Dr. David Copenhaver are our literacy instructors at camp. So they are really well known in the field of literacy instruction for children with complex communication needs and significant disabilities. When I talk about augmentative and alternative communication, or AAC, I refer to core vocabulary. The idea around core vocabulary is that if we give children access to the words that we all use over and over and over again, and we can teach them how to manipulate and reorder those words, then we can teach them to communicate on anything, on any topic, anywhere they are. We all use about 250 to 350 words to communicate what we want to say 85% of the time. And that includes words like good and bad and up and me and mine and you and go, right? So if we give children access to those words and help them learn how to order those words and create meaningful language for many different functions, then we're giving them a whole lot of communication. These are some examples of some core vocabulary systems. We have LAMP Words for Life, Project Core, Snap Plus Core First, Prolo Quo. There are many, many, many others, and every system can be adapted for vision issues, for example. We can access communication using eye gaze, using auditory scanning, and many, many different means. Big picture too. So I want to say something about symbolizing text. We see a lot in our educational systems where we're using instruction that includes associating print to a symbol, word by word by word by word, right? Systems like unique learning systems and, the other one just popped out of my mind. But I want to point out that symbolizing text in reading instruction isn't going to result in reading with comprehension. And there's a lot of research that points that out, that when children are given text and we pair every word with a symbol, they're distracted by those symbols and trying to figure out what those symbols are rather than focusing on the text that we're giving them. Symbol-based systems are amazing for communication. They can be used to help children communicate and talk about what they're reading and what they're writing, but they're not going to promote increased reading comprehension if we're always pairing symbols with text. For example, this is a reading passage from a children's book. If I were to give you this on your own, can you tell me what this passage means? Anybody want to make a guess? Can you guess a word? I'm thinking maybe the caps, right? The hats, that's pretty concrete. It's maybe about...
Buy, perhaps?
So there once was a peddler who sold caps, right? We now understand what the text means because we were given the written text. If we have children who do not read, they're not going to get that meaning with the symbols, right? It's not going to be any more helpful for them because they don't know what the context is. So before I get into some emergent literacy routines, I just want to focus in on symbols are a beautiful thing, and we can use visual supports all the time in our instruction, but if we pair symbols with text over and over again, we're going to have children who struggle to comprehend text and to understand that the meaning comes from the letters and the words and the print and not the pictures. All right. So let me talk just a little bit about what emergent literacy is before I go on and talk about this, our instructional routines that I want to talk about. An emergent literacy learner is one that may or may not know all the letters and letter sounds of the alphabet. They may struggle to use speech, sign language, pictures, a communication device to communicate everything that they need to communicate. And they're very unlikely to read independently, right? They might be those kids who are unlikely to pick up a book and go through it. And so that's who I'm referring to when I'm talking about emergent literacy today. These are your beginning readers, and your beginning readers can be 3, and your beginning readers can be 19, right? And so we need to make sure that when we're providing these instructional routines, we're keeping in mind that individual's interests and age and passions, so that we're providing this instruction in a really motivating and fun way. So when I was asked to present here today, I present a lot to professionals, but I wanted to focus on some routines that I think that can be done in the home. And then at the end of my presentation, I promise I'll share lots and lots of resources for you to take to your educators and say, hey, look at this research, right? This is what I want us to be doing. This is where we need to be going with my child's literacy intervention. But I wanted to talk about some routines that we can do at home. So we're going to start with 5 emergent literacy instructional routines. And the emphasis in all these is really, it's about interaction and communication. So we're going to start with structured shared reading, and I like to take an approach called following the car. We're connecting the book, even before we start reading, we are connecting the book to something that the individual, the child already knows, is passionate about, has an interest in. It might be an outing that your family did recently. It might be a passion about trains or Legos, right? We want to connect the book to previously discussed and experienced things at the very beginning. And then as we read, we want to provide lots of wait time and invite or encourage or ask our child to participate in the book. So we might read a page and we might pause. And we might say, oh, I like that. And all the while, I have some visual supports. All the while, we can talk about, oh, I like it, right? Or, you want it? I think I want to see more, right? We can model verbally, and we can model on a child's AAC device system, whatever it is that they have, because we're really trying to promote engagement and communication and interaction. And anytime our individual, our child is engaging in the book, reaching for something, maybe want to turn the page because they want to move on and they're done with that page, you can model, oh, let's do more, turn the page, right? So we're recognizing and responding to anything that our child is communicating as a result of us interacting with this book together. We want to read with enthusiasm and really help and foster a love of reading in the child. We want to read fluently. Children who are nonverbal, they're struggling to develop that inner voice that we all have, right? We have this fluent inner voice, and I think that that's something that children are trying to build on, and they can utilize our inner voice to help them with that. While we're reading, we're not necessarily constantly checking for comprehension. We're not necessarily constantly saying, show me the dog and show me the house and testing, but we're attributing meaning to the print that we see. We're modeling using our core words, and we're just encouraging lots of communication. So if I were reading the dog book on Tar Heel Reader, that website down there is an awesome, awesome resource for really easy to read books on searchable topics. So if your child loves princesses, you plug in princesses. And the really neat thing is those books can be adapted to address vision issues such as cortical vision impairment. We can change the colors of those books and have more contrast and things like that. So if I'm reading my book, for example, and my child, I might point out good dog, and the child might sign dog or point to the picture, and I might then come to the device or the system and I might say, oh, you see it. I see it. I like it, right? And so we're teaching our children how to communicate in lots of different words. If the child wants to turn the page, again, we might talk about opening it, or we might say we want to go more pages and turn that page. Repetitive reading the same story over and over again for different purposes really helps foster confidence in a child in understanding the book and being engaged in the book, and we can plan each reading. For example, if we choose a book, we want to read it a few times in the week, I'll take a Post-it and I'll write down on the Post-it the words I want to target with each read. And so these, again, are core words. I like, he, come, see it, want, go. These are words that I'm going to try to model for my child throughout our storybook reading. All right, so that's shared reading. It's all about engagement and waiting and waiting for the child to react, to expand on what it is that they're communicating, and to model lots of communication. The next activity I want to talk about is predictable chart writing. We see it in a lot of classrooms. It's generally a group activity, but it can be modified so easily to happen in the home. And it's a really fun way to practice communication, to talk about concepts about print, to interact around a joint activity, to work on word identification, and just to start hitting on those reading elements such as punctuation and capitalization and spelling. All right, and there are 5 steps to predictable chart writing. You do the whole kit and caboodle. You start by writing the chart. This is an example of a chart. You're going to read and reread the chart. You're going to do sentence strips, be the sentence, and make the book. In predictable chart writing, the adult is going to come up with a topic that you're going to then write together. And so the ideal is to select a topic that's really motivating, but that also is going to give you lots and lots of practice for words that you can learn to read, communicate, and write all at the same time. You want to select a sentence stem to give you lots of repetition, and you're going to talk about the letters and the words as you write them and model talking about the chart. We want to select words that maximize communication. We want to think about words that are early reading words, and we want to tie our themes to activities, to interests that children love. So it might be an outing that you're going to do. It might be sports. It might be favorite activities. We can do all the, I want to go, he can, I put on is a really great sentence starter. And we're writing the chart as the child is talking about it. So my chart is I can see. I ask the child, what can you see when you look out the window in the fall? What do you see? And they might indicate grass. So they might point to the grass. You might have some symbols to give them some choices, or some pictures, a picture book, and they might point, and then we're writing grass. G-R-A-S-S. Oh, I have to put my period there. I can see grass, right? And so we're modeling all the components of reading and writing here. Here's an example. And then after we've written our whole chart, we want to go back and we want to talk about things that we're seeing over and over again. We want to talk about, oh, this looks like a taller letter. This is a capital I. This is my beginning of my sentence. And we want to read the chart fluently and emphasizing the words in the core stem. And we can ask somebody to point to the words. If they're nonverbal, right, we can ask them to be our pointer, to be our helper. As we read, I can see grass, I can see leaves, I can see trees. What did Dad see? Dad saw trees. Look at that. Trees start with T. And we want to read and reread the chart a few times and become really familiar with it. And then we're going to go to sentence strips. So we're going to take each of these sentences, and we are going to cut out a sentence strip like this, for example. And what we're doing in this particular phase of the activity is that we are teaching concept of word, right? So if this is my child's sentence that he created with me, we're gonna read it a few times. I can see grass, and then we're gonna ask him where should I cut it? If I want to make separate words, I want to make 4 words. Where should I cut it? If our child can cut, absolutely. We're gonna teach this skill and have that child cut individual words out. And so essentially we're going to end up with 4 words. If the child can't read it, we're going to read it. I can see grass. All right. So we have our sentence strips, and we're going to cut them apart, and we're going to give them an opportunity to do it as independently as possible. We might have a few spare sentence strips, just in case. That we might need to pull out, but we are modeling the process word for word. And then what happens is we have a bunch of words that are out of order, right? And our next step is to help our child figure out what order they need to go in to recreate the sentence that matches their sentence. And we're comparing and contrasting as we go. So I might read, see, can I grass? Does that sound the same as I can see grass? No. Which word should I start with? See, can I? Child indicates I. Yes, right, great. Okay, so we move that down. Let's see. See, can, grass. I know it starts with I can. We're just constantly comparing and contrasting our original chart with our sentence strips. And we are encouraging and teaching and modeling until we have our sentence strip in the right order. We glue them together and we party. Okay? Any questions? All right. Put them in the right order. The next step, I'm going to go over this, but I think maybe in a household, if you don't have enough individuals participating, it might be a little difficult. But we can be the sentence, right? We can write the individual words on large sheets of paper, and we can ask each person to grab. Go get can. Can you get can? Okay, they've got can. Go, you, Dad, you get I. Okay, I got I. And everybody has their word, and we're helping the child figure out what order our people need to be in to recreate that sentence. You're doing the same thing, and you're referring back to your chart, and you're saying, ooh, see, can, see, I, grass. Somebody's got to move. Who needs to be first, right? I can see grass. And we're talking about same and different until we have everybody in the right order. We're constantly asking, does that sound the same as what we have in our chart? Again, we're modeling how to say the sentence fluently and how to use core vocabulary as we go. It's just a fun, mobile activity to do if we can. We have a sheet, big, one word. All right, The last step of predictable chart writing is making a book. And I think for me, this is hugely motivating for children. We can create a paper book, an electronic book, in apps like Book Creator, Pictello, or on tarheelreader.org. And so our children become writers and publishers. We want to gather images to help them create or illustrate their story. So we take each of our sentence strips on one page. We help them identify an image that works for them. They could draw a picture. They could cut something out from a magazine or find something on the internet. And page by page, we build their story that they've written. Children begin to learn that writing is communication, right? Because they can then take that book that they've created with you and they can show grandma, or they can take it to school and they can show a teacher. It can be about an outing or whatever it is they did. And what I have found that these books then can be read independently by children, and they're getting lots and lots of practice recognizing those words and really understanding that print has meaning. So here's an example of what a book might look like. I think I did this with PowerPoint, but Book Creator is very similar. It's a very inexpensive book creating app. Okay, so that's the 5 steps of predictable chart writing. And now I want to move on to building alphabetical awareness and phonological awareness. I'm going to jump ahead to my notes. Yeah.
So when you do this, do you expect the child to be reading the words? Or?
Some children will be able to, and when they're not, I'm reading the words for them, right? I am saying, I can see grass. But I'm highlighting the text as I do that. I'm pointing word for word to which word. And over time, if you have a verbal child, they can learn to read those words, and if your child is nonverbal, you're being their voice, right? You're associating that whole word to these letters and words on the text.
So it's like introducing sight word reading.
Well, but we're working on decoding too, because if we're talking about, for example, as I'm writing, I write and, oh, that's a C, right? I'm talking as I'm writing to make sure that we're working on decoding as well, right? Because we want children to be able to decode and do sight words. And most of these early words, they're sight words. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. But these aren't, right? These fringe words that we're talking about, these are generally not going to be sight words. If I'm making a snowman, if my project is to make a snowman, and my core words that I'm working on are I put on, I might have the options of mittens and hats and gloves and boots, and those aren't going to be sight words. We're teaching the children how to decode. This is just beginning steps. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Yeah.
So Protocol to Go or the LAMP program that you had earlier in your handouts, if a child is using that as their voice, okay, because they are nonverbal, would you then, when you say you're teaching them to read and you could be their voice, could they then use their device to also read it? I can see grass. Can you have them point to the I on their LAMP program, find the word can? Would you do that?
You completely could, because it is as important to me that the child can read that word as it is for the child to be able to communicate that word, find that word, locate that word on their device, even spell that word using their keyboard.
Their keyboard.
Yeah,
So you would do
yeah.
that as well.
I would absolutely do it all together. That's why this is an integrated approach where you can. It doesn't help if you can just communicate them. I want to be able to spell them. I want to be able to read them. I want to know where those words are so I can use them over and over again in a functional way. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah. So we want to make sure we're building alphabet awareness. That means recognizing the 26 uppercase and lowercase letters. It means understanding the letter sounds. It means being able to pair uppercase and lowercase letters. And we want to be able to make and select letters for writing. That's our goal, right? We have to know that there are 26 letters, and I'm going to take some of these letters, put them together, and I'm going to create something that communicates something meaningfully. Phonological awareness is the ability to identify and manipulate words and sounds in the spoken language. We need to learn to hear the differences between he and she, and we need to learn to recognize how many symbols we're going to find in a word, and that words may begin and end in different sounds, or they might rhyme. These are all skills that I think can be challenging for our children who are nonverbal because they don't have that sound system that we have. And I think that's a huge obstacle for educators. It doesn't have to be. We just have to do things differently. That's all, right? We tap into that receptive language that we know they have, and we're teaching, and we just do things differently. We manipulate the learning environment in a different way. The key to success in working on alphabet knowledge and phonological awareness is having lots of variety and doing it in many, many different ways. It's not enough to match letters for years and years and years, right? It's not enough to match uppercase and lowercase letters, or letters and letter sounds. We need to do it in a meaningful way so children understand that those letters are meaningful. When you put them together in a certain way, you're communicating. And children can learn these symbols. These symbols are about as abstract as you can get when we're talking about letters, right? But we can teach them, and we can teach them letters at the same time as we're teaching them communication. Because remember, when we looked at that first big picture slide that I had, we can teach written and oral language all at the same time. All right, so let's talk about some fun ways to work on alphabet knowledge and phonological awareness. We can use alphabet books, and if you go to tarlareader.org, that particular resource, you can search for alphabet books by interest area. So if your child loves American history, you can find an American history alphabet book. If they love cats, boats, transportation, Thomas the Tank Engine, you can find alphabet books and print them and read them. And as you're doing this, you're making connections to core words and language. You're talking about, I see, in that example, I see cat, I think it's cool, right? We're reading and we're talking and interacting all at the same time. And as we're reading these books, we're highlighting the text. So we're talking about, oh, this book is, or this page is about bee. Bob bought a boat. Look, they're all bee. This is how I make a bee, uppercase, lowercase b. We can talk about environmental prints. We can point out letters and words and products in signs, in billboards, and traffic signs, and menus. And constantly, as we see that text, we want to make sure that our children know that you can glean meaning from those letters, from those words. We can create really fun activities around learning the alphabet and letter sounds. With this particular resource was made in Lesson Picks. It's a $36 subscription, annual subscription, and they already have ready-made activities such as game boards and bingo cards and matching cards and go fish cards already there, and you can create your own as well. Lots of different ways to practice in just fun ways, and getting lots and lots of exposure to the alphabet and letter sounds. We can use our names to teach alphabet knowledge and phonological awareness. At school, it might look like signing in for attendance, signing in for whether or not you're a packer or a buyer for lunch, whether you're a car rider or a bus rider on the way home. But at home, we can post our survey question of the day. It might be voting on something you're going to do that evening or what you're going to eat that night. And you can all take turns writing your names, and then you can talk about what letters are the same, what letters are different, and contrast and compare the names that we're seeing. We really want to avoid copying, tracing, and using whole name stamps because we're not getting practice understanding and isolating letters and words. When we're working on alphabet knowledge and phonological awareness, we want to make sure that children have access to all the letters all the time during literacy activities. There might be instruction where you, at school, where you focus on a letter of the week, right? All week you're working on F. But what if I want to learn to write the word fun and you don't give me the U and the N? I can't do it. I can't model it. And so it's really important that we have access to all the letters all the time. And we want to incorporate whatever that core vocabulary system that we have to talk about letters and sounds and talk about what's the same and what's different, what I like and what I don't like, what comes first, last, etc. All right. Independent reading is our next instructional strategy. And I want to start talking about independent reading by pointing out that there are so many different things we can read, right? It doesn't have to be a big library of books. It can be our baseball cards, our menus, our guidebooks, our maps. And independent reading is all about selecting, the child selecting things that interest them. And together we can interact about our book choices, and we can talk about our preferences and our interests. We can share our mutual excitement over things that we enjoy, and we can provide lots of opportunities for making choices and practicing choice making. And most of all, we're talking about communication. So this is Lily at camp. Lily wanted a book from our library, but she had a real hard time selecting something that would really interest her, right? So she pulled out one after the other, and I watched her do this, and it gave me a great opportunity to model lots of different language around the books she was choosing, and she really was trying her hardest to pick something cool. But I can comment and almost do a play-by-play about what I'm seeing and interact with her. Oh, I see you're looking for a book. I hope you find it. And then she, as you can see, she discarded lots of books. And I can model, that's not it, right? That's not what you wanted. She picked another one. Oh, I like that one. I like cats. I think we're going to see cats in that book. So we're just having conversation. It's all about the interaction. She ultimately picked her book, and she sat and she went through it. And whenever I could, I got in there and I tried to do some modeling. But for me personally, it's more about the interaction in selecting the book, and then let them read independently. And then we can talk about it when she's done. There are lots of accessible reading materials. I'm mentioning Target Reader again because I love it. We can search by topic. We can build a collection of books. And we can change the pages and text colors for students who have visual impairments. I'll show you what that might look like with the pig who drove a rig. Right? It's very easy for me to change the background of that book, to change the color of the text, to pop that picture out with a white border. And I can download those books, make those changes easily in PowerPoint. If you're familiar with Pictello, you can upload those books into Pictello, which is a super book reading app, and it makes it switch accessible as well. So there are lots of ways we can adapt books to make sure that everybody has access to books that they love. All right, that was independent reading. I'm just going to check my time. Independent writing. So when I started, I shared with you how important it is to me that we make sure that our children learn to write, because if they have access to the alphabet and they can write, then they can communicate anything regardless of their verbal abilities. And so even if we have beginner emergent communicators, emergent literacy learners, we can still give them access to the alphabet. In fact, we must still give them access to the alphabet and get them communicating with letters as soon as possible. We don't need to know, our children don't need to know every single letter perfectly, uppercase and lowercase, before we start writing letter by letter. The emphasis on writing at this stage is it's about communication. This is another way for us to communicate. And we're teaching children that there is meaning in those combinations of the letters that they create. But the writing topics that we provide for children has to be interesting, and it's really helpful when we know the context of what we expect them to write about. Everybody needs access to all 26 letters. Pencils can take all kinds of shapes and forms. We've got label makers, we've got magnets, we've got a keyboard. We have an eye gaze board and a flip chart. We can use partner-assisted letter writing if your child is unable to access a device, keyboard, anything like that, right? We can have the child tell me what letter you want, what letter are you looking for? And if the child's looking here and they're looking at E, for example, I might say, okay, so I know it's one of these 5 letters. Which letter is it? And then if the child looks here, I know it's the red letter, so I know it's the E, right? And that's what I write down. That's what they picked. That's what they write down. The key is offering topics that the child really enjoys, familiar photos, objects, favorite things to do, favorite pastimes, past experiences, or trips. It's way easier for us to attribute meaning to emergent writing that our kids do when we know the context. Think about how when we're talking with little kids and we don't understand anything they're saying, we say, show me, can you show me, right? And we're asking them, give me a sense for what it is, right? Point to what you want. Come, take my hand and show me what you're talking about. We need that context. And working on emergent literacy, working on emergent writing, I should say, is the same way. When we know the context, it's going to be way easier for us to attribute meaning to what they're saying and what they're trying to write and what they're trying to communicate. So we can first talk about a selected topic. So if we're writing about this, I'm sure you can't see it, but if we're writing about this pug, right? And I know my child loves dogs, so we're going to talk about this one. Then I might model as well. I see dog, right? I'm writing next to that child. And I'm talking about what I'm seeing. Oh, he looks soft. He's cute. He has big eyes, things like that. And so we're talking about it first, and then we go to write. And I write, and my child writes. The tricky part, of course, is attributing meaning to that student's writing. If they struggle, bless you.
Allergies.
Can't be Cleveland. If they struggle putting letters together meaningful or scribble in any way, right? We want to try to help make meaningful connections between the topic that we chose, in this case it's my pug, and what I'm reading in their writing. And when we look at that emergent writing, we want to avoid general feedback like, oh, good job, or, oh, you wrote a lot of words. Wow, you wrote for a long time. That's a lot of stuff. We want to make sure that the feedback that we provide that child is very specific to what we think they might be writing about, right? If we see a letter P and I'm working on a pug picture, right, then we're going to say, oh, it looks like you tried to write pug. I'm going to write pug, and I write it down. So we're giving very specific feedback making connections between print and language. So this is an example of emergent writing. Anybody see anything here? Anything pop out? Yeah, yeah, right. So this child already has some sight words and she can clearly write them. So, but I really don't know what this is about other than I see dad and mom. I have no idea when I'm just looking at this what the individual is writing about. So should we buy a picture? Should we buy a picture to help us a little bit with the meeting? All right, so she wanted to write about her new friend. So this is Christina at camp with her camp literacy counselor, Helen. And so we see that she began her writing sample with right? So Helen can say, oh, I think you're writing about me or my new friend. Yes, and you could write my. Oh, I see, write my. And so Helen is doing writing side by side. She's writing as well. But this is the important part, right? This communication here is equally as important as highlighting the text, trying to glean some meaning from it, and modeling writing at the same time.
When you say modeling writing,
Yeah.
Are you physically here, or can it also be like typing it out on their communication device or whatever?
You can do both. You can do both. I try to do lots of modes all the time, so it's not always just one way or the other. I tend to make sure that kids have access to their device. If I'm trying to do it at the same time, then they don't have access to it.
Right.
So I might have an alternative device or go old school with a whiteboard and a marker. Or I might have the iPad that's emulating their communication system. Yeah, but I really think it's so important for children to see us writing and for us to be writing out loud, for us to be thoughtful about how we're writing and what letters we're choosing so that they're learning to make those connections at this stage, right? All right, how much time? Okay. I wanted to share lots of different resources for independent reading. This is just an example of a whole bunch that are out there, that websites. We can use lots of iPad programs and things like that. I think the more we can read in different ways and the more we choose a wide variety and diverse reading samples, I think the better it is. But we have to understand that some kids might prefer technology. Some kids might prefer books. Some kids might prefer their baseball cards or signs or things in the environment. Making books is really, really powerful, like we did with the predictable chart rating activity, making our own books, writing our own books, just to make sure that children have access to print material all the time. Yeah. And I wanted to share some resources for educators and parents, I promised you, because I don't know how much time you have at home to do these things, right? And I recognize that. So if there are any activities here that you can glean from and do at home, I think it's super fun and very, very beneficial. But I also promised you some resources that you can take home with you and share with your child's educators and speech-language pathologists and related service providers. At the top, we have an emergent literacy instruction course with our instructors from camp, Drs. Karen Erickson and David Copenhaver. That's happening in Sanibel this October. 2 days in what I just tried to run through super, super fast. And it's for both parents and professionals. The website for the Center for Literacy and Disability Studies has so many resources, courses, articles, research to all about instruction for both emergent literacy learners and conventional literacy learners. So down the road, when your child is able to glean meaning from text, but maybe is struggling with comprehension, maybe having trouble making inferences and really gleaning understanding from complex text, those are great resources. Dave has a super website, his LitDis site. The dynamic learning maps, they have, and the DLM professional development modules are super modules that talk about shared reading and predictable chart writing and communication, all kinds of things in really great ways that you could share with your educators. Project Core is a site that's dedicated to promoting communication and emergent literacy skills, like what I've talked about here today, and it's super for beginning AAC users and individuals who are supporting beginning AAC users learn to read and write and communicate. There's some other ones there. All right. So I'm heading in the home stretch, but these are slides from our organization. Does anybody have any questions? Does anybody want to talk about anything? Yeah.
I have one question when you're talking about the alphabet and having the child be able to have access to all letters. Do you use a specific font?
No. I would say a simple font. You mean like script versus Sanskrit and like Times versus Helvetica? And no, but I do make sure that I provide access to uppercase and lowercase letters. So we might do an activity. If somebody who's really complex, maybe using that flip chart that I showed a picture of, we might use uppercase letters one time, lowercase letters another time, so that we're exposing the child to both. Yeah. Do you have any ideas?
No, I'm just
because I know you.
Like for me, like say the A on this slide.
Yeah.
The way it's written versus just an A with a.
The one that we write, right?
Yeah, and for a child, I would think this one. You say this is an A, this is an A, and then you show 3 or 4 or 5 different A's, and it's like, well, which A are you? Which one's really the A?
But I think kids are flexible, and I think unless we teach that, for example, when we work with symbols and we're teaching a dog is a dog, right? This symbol represents lots of different dogs, and I think we have to do the same with letters because they are going to encounter, at least I used to be a graphic designer, so in my experience, more people use that silly A that nobody writes, right, in type. That's the A that we're going to find more often than not in print. So I think exposing to both.
I definitely, for my daughter, I mean, she's not an AAC user, but when she was learning letters, I used to call it the book A and the book G. This is how they put the A in books, and this is how they put the G in
That's
books.
smart.
All the other letters are the same. It's just the book A and the book G. That's what we call it.
Yeah.
And she sees it, and she just says it like an A. But I mean, it took long. It took a while for her to, but then she's just like, oh, that's the funny A or whatever, the book A.
And why do we do that? Why do we have to have 2 A's? Why do we have to have 2 A's? I don't know, but it's a good question.
Teachers who do write the A that way, I cannot physically. I've
Yeah.
tried. I'm like, I can't do that.
Yeah, it's hard. But I think we can expose to both. Even if I don't write that A that way, I might point it out like you do as I'm reading. Look, that's an A. It's that funny A. I write my A like this.
It's kind of like going
Yeah.
back and reading Old English.
Yeah.
And an S looks different than our S, and it's very difficult. I mean, you can figure it out after a while, but it's difficult if the font's different. But I don't know. That's what I was wondering.
Yeah. I'm all about exposure to promote generalization. Yeah.
In terms of writing.
Yeah.
Okay. In your experience, when a child, like, doesn't have use of this hand, so they're writing with this hand, and it's hard to hold the paper, and they're frustrated, and they're throwing the pen, and they hate writing.
Mm-hmm.
When do you cross the line and say, you know what, keyboarding is good for this child? Instead of
Before the,
pushing?
yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know about you, but I don't use handwriting that often, right? And so I'm not an OT. So if I were an OT, I'd probably tell you, oh, you got to keep working on it really hard. And I don't disagree with that at all. But if my goal is to teach writing in that moment, oh, I'm going to make it as easy as humanly possible.
So keyboarding is something you would advocate?
Oh,
for
100%.
meetings,
100%.
say, keyboarding is where we need to go because this child is so
Right.
frustrated.
Absolutely.
You don't want them to be like associated with a bad,
Yeah.
like
Oh.
negative impact. You want them to be like, oh, I
Right.
like this, I
I
can.
want him or her to
Right.
learn.
Yeah.
If I can also, so that's a question we also have for our son, and we discussed it with Cynthia, so she was here yesterday, she's a neuropsychological, and so I asked her if there was a specific, at least on the cognitive standpoint, if there was a specific advantage of keeping writing, handwriting, and she said no, absolutely not. The goal is to write.
Yeah.
And in her report for our soon-to-be 5-year-old who's going to kindergarten, for the education team, she wrote, don't insist, keyboarding is perfectly fine.
Yeah, because writing is about putting those letters. That's why I keep talking about putting the letters together and make words to express meaning. It has nothing to do with this, right? If this is hard, I just want to get my ideas out. I just want to, and in order to learn to write, I have to use letters, but I can access them with eye gaze. I can have if the child can speak at all or communicate, I can write those letters. I can be a scribe. It doesn't matter. The motorical aspect of handwriting is just this tiny little bit of part of writing that I tend to ignore because I want it to be so easy. I'm glad that you asked that question. Yeah.
To be able to write your name as well.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's helpful if it's within the scope of the child's
Mhm.
ability to learn, because it's just another sensory aspect to learning the letter and the sound,
Mhm.
right? So it's just another way to store the information.
Mhm.
I think. So if it's within the scope of their ability or to learn how to form the letter, or if in the case where they don't have like a keyboard available or they want to write, I find that it's helpful to have that other. And the thing is, like, keyboarding is really hard also with one hand, and the visual information as well. For my daughter, like, she looks at the keyboard and she's like, oh my god, so many letters, like I've only got the one hand, and she forgets about the right side because of the visual impairment.
Mhm.
So it's like for our kids, it's so complicated.
Right.
But
Yeah.
so it's a lot of, every kind of form is its own challenges. So she'll, even though it's difficult, she'll still prefer to, right now, she just
To use handwriting.
To use handwriting, she just gets like, so now we're looking into like alternative keyboards and how to make it easier to see, and so that she can have access to both, but she looks at the keyboard and it's like,
That's
Too
where-
much.
Yeah, that's
Too
where I
much.
know that sometimes the keyboards like on the iPads and stuff are even better than just a standard keyboard.
Yeah.
Now Richard hates picking up pen and pencil.
Yeah,
paper.
yeah.
Like, he'll do it if we make him, and it's very much like we'll do this for his OT goals.
oh
But yet he can get on his device and is like,
yeah.
granted, we're not spelling necessarily real words at this point, but he
Yeah.
loves putting in letters and making things.
Nice.
And and because it's on an iPad, it's not like a typical keyboard where you have all of this. It's all right here. It's all, and he actually doesn't even like use his whole hand. Like, he is so adept at like the thumb and finger. Even his OT and SLP who we worked with is just like, we have never seen a kid that quickly figure out like he can fly with just these two fingers.
Nice. And we can adapt so many of those keyboards to color our nouns or our vowels differently from we can manipulate a lot of those keyboards to make it a little bit easier. Yeah. Great. Anything else? Anybody else want to share anything? Awesome. So CCBDD, we're just part of the community. We're really making sure that individuals are participating in their community, work, live, love, learn in their community. Inclusion begins with you. 5 things you can do to promote inclusion, like you guys be inspired, be inclusive, hire, volunteer, connect. And this is me. I wanted to make sure you had my contact information. If you have any questions, if you want to share anything, or if there's anything I can do better as I talk with other communities and families and professionals, I'd love to hear from you.
And all her slides are in the app too.
Yeah, they're all.
Yes, they are. Yep,
Yeah.
yep. So you'll have links to all those websites and all those resources in real time.
So I just found it really interesting that this Camp ALEC is
Yeah.
like an hour away from me, and I had no clue it existed.
Oh, it's an Indian Trails camp. Are you from in Grand Rapids?
Most of my family's in Grand Rapids. I'm
Oh.
from South Bend, so an hour and a half, but no clue it existed.
Yeah, we're a little camp. We can only serve about 20 kids a year. So in the grand scheme of things, we're little. But we've been around for
Yeah.
6 years now. Yeah.
What are the requirements for attending camp?
Because it's an independent camp, our campers do need to have enough ability to communicate that they can communicate their needs, whether they're in pain, things like that. Generally speaking, our campers are conventional literacy learners, so they know all their letters. They participate in shared and guided reading activities. They have a good way to communicate. And we do have the medical issues. We have a nurse on staff 24 hours. We provide one-to-one care depending on the kids. So
So do you submit an application and then you review the application?
we do.
And choose the children?
Yes, we do. We have a really lengthy application process that lets you tell us all about your kiddo. And then we decide together. Because the last thing we want to do is have a kiddo who's miserable and unhappy, right? So we've turned people away and said, hey, do it next year. Wait till next year. And then they've come back next year and they were good to go. My partner and I, Gina and I, we've been doing this for 7 years. Gina had a child whose name was ALEC, who passed away suddenly. But so we're moms first at camp. And so we take it's a huge responsibility to have kids that are as complex as the kids that we have and have them stay on their own. But for us, it's so important that our kids learn to advocate for themselves and communicate to anyone and be on their own and have their own experiences. And so that's why we do this.
This may not be something important, but yesterday we had a free day because my daughter was in the scientific and I had the children. We went up the street to this, I called it a money museum, but a federal, it's a bank. It's like up 2 blocks.
The Federal Reserve? Is it in the Federal Reserve
Yes.
building?
There's an interactive for children, but I loved it. All right. I watched Lucas, who hates the keyboard. All right, it just makes him angry trying to find. But because you could have your photograph placed on a sheet of money, and you could choose all the fonts and things around it. He wiped his email address in there, and then they had it printed out when we left. It was.
So he had a dollar bill or a bill with.
But that was just one of the many interactive things up there. They had where you make rubbings of designs. Well, that takes some. He's a left-hander now. He's a right-hander by birth. That makes him have to control. I don't know, we're just 1 year in, and every time I find something that's free and you can carry it home, it's like, oh, check mark. But it's just a bank. It's like 2 blocks.
I didn't know that existed.
Yes.
Federal Reserve Bank.
The Federal Reserve
Right.
Bank.
Nice building.
That's so cool.
But yeah, and it's free, and they're so nice. And we were there, and we got so involved that we didn't realize it was time to close. And they came up and gently said, let's get this finished, you know. Right, oh, it was, and they gave him a little bag of shredded money, so now he thinks he's a millionaire. It's a cool
Oh, I'll have to remember that. I didn't even know that existed. Welcome to Cleveland, everybody. If you're not from here, by the way. Thank you so much. Thank you.